What if the most powerful biological reset your body can experience does not require weeks of effort, strict rules, expensive supplements, or extreme discipline? What if it begins with just one day? Not forever. Not as a lifestyle overhaul. Not as a promise of instant transformation. Just one intentional day. Because in human biology, change does not always require force. Very often it requires the right signal. Inside your body, right now, there are systems constantly working to repair tissue, replace damaged cells, and maintain long-term resilience. These systems do not wait for motivation. They do not respond to trends. They respond to environmental cues, signals that tell them whether conditions are safe for repair, or dangerous enough to shut it down. One of the most important of these systems involves stem cells. Stem cells are not a futuristic concept. They are not experimental. They are a fundamental part of human biology. Their role is both simple and profound: to regenerate tissue, replace aging or damaged cells, and support the body's ability to heal itself over time. But stem cells are also conservative. They do not activate aggressively in chaotic environments. They do not regenerate efficiently under constant stress. They are sensitive to inflammation, hormonal imbalance, and metabolic overload. In other words, stem cells wait for permission. At the same time, another system inside your body is listening just as closely: fat storage. Stubborn fat is not stubborn because it is lazy. It is stubborn because it is protective. Fat tissue exists to ensure survival. When the body senses uncertainty, nutritional stress, hormonal stress, inflammatory stress, it sends a very clear message to fat cells: hold on. Preserve energy. Prepare for instability. This response becomes even stronger with visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that surrounds vital organs. Visceral fat is not passive. It is metabolically active. It releases inflammatory signals, interacts with hormones, and responds aggressively to stress cues. And here is where the connection becomes critical. The same biological signals that suppress stem cell regeneration often encourage stubborn fat storage. Chronic inflammation. Persistently elevated insulin. High cortisol. Constant eating without recovery periods. These signals tell the body that survival matters more than renewal. When survival is prioritized, repair is postponed. But biology also has another operating mode. A mode in which inflammation quiets. A mode in which insulin sensitivity improves. A mode in which fat tissue stops behaving defensively. A mode in which stem cells are allowed to do what they are designed to do. This mode does not activate by accident. It activates when the body receives a consistent, calm message. Resources are available, stress is low, and repair is safe. This is why scientists have become increasingly interested in short-term metabolic resets. Not extreme deprivation. Not starvation. But brief, intentional pauses that allow internal signaling to recalibrate. This is where the idea of trying it for one day becomes biologically meaningful. Not as a challenge. Not as a cleanse. Not as a detox. But as a controlled signal. When food intake is paused for a defined window, several predictable physiological changes begin to occur. Insulin levels fall. Inflammatory signaling begins to decline. The body shifts from constant storage mode into a state of metabolic flexibility. At the same time, a powerful internal process called autophagy becomes more active. Autophagy is often misunderstood. It is not about destruction. It is about cleanup. Old, damaged, or inefficient cellular components are broken down so healthier structures can take their place. This process supports regeneration. Stem cells respond favorably to this environment. When metabolic noise is reduced, stem cells receive a clear signal: repair is allowed. Not forced. Not rushed. But permitted. Simultaneously, fat tissue receives a different message. Instead of protect reserves, it hears energy can be mobilized safely. This is a critical distinction. Stubborn fat does not release under threat. It releases under safety. This is why constant restriction often backfires. This is why aggressive dieting can increase stress hormones. And this is why people can eat carefully, exercise consistently, and still struggle with deep abdominal fat. The body never receives the signal that it can shift out of defense mode. One carefully structured day can interrupt this pattern. Sleep begins to improve metabolic sensitivity. Morning cortisol follows a healthier rhythm. Insulin signaling becomes more responsive. And none of this requires weeks of effort. The human body responds remarkably quickly to environmental change. Within hours, immune signaling begins to shift. Within a single day, metabolic pathways start recalibrating. This is why research consistently shows that short-term fasting or controlled eating windows, when done correctly, can activate regenerative pathways without causing harm. This is not punishment. It is recovery. It is giving the body a brief opportunity to rebalance itself. This is also why many people notice something interesting before they ever see physical changes. Stubborn fat areas, especially around the abdomen, often feel different before they look different. This is not imagination. Tissue behavior changes before appearance follows. Biology always works from the inside outward. Trying something for one day does not guarantee transformation, but it can reveal something far more important. It reveals how your body behaves when stress is removed. And for many people, that response is surprising, because the human body is not broken. It is simply overwhelmed by constant input. Give it one day of clarity, and it begins to remember how to regulate itself. Once the body receives the signal of safety, something remarkable begins to happen beneath the surface. This is the moment where biology shifts gears. Not dramatically, not violently, but intelligently. Inside your bloodstream, insulin, the hormone responsible for directing glucose into cells, begins to stabilize. When insulin remains elevated for long periods, fat cells receive a constant instruction to store energy. They close their doors to fat release. They become defensive. But when insulin levels gently decline, fat tissue begins to behave differently. Fat cells are no longer under pressure to hoard. They no longer perceive scarcity. They begin to release stored energy, particularly from visceral fat deposits. This is not guesswork. This is observed physiology. Visceral fat is highly sensitive to hormonal signals. It responds faster than subcutaneous fat because it exists to protect organs. When the body senses metabolic calm, visceral fat is often the first to loosen its grip. At the same time, inflammatory markers begin to shift. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the most underestimated barriers to both fat loss and regeneration. It interferes with insulin signaling. It disrupts hormonal balance. And most importantly, it suppresses stem cell activity. Stem cells do not thrive in inflammatory environments. They retreat. They remain dormant. They conserve energy. But when inflammation begins to quiet, even temporarily, stem cells receive a subtle but powerful message: conditions are improving. This is where a single day becomes biologically meaningful. Because inflammation does not require weeks to begin decreasing. It responds rapidly to metabolic signals. During a controlled fasting window or simplified eating pattern, the digestive system is given rest. Energy normally used for digestion is redirected toward cellular maintenance. The immune system shifts away from constant activation and moves into regulation mode. This is when autophagy intensifies. Autophagy is not a trend word. It is a survival mechanism built into human evolution. When nutrient intake pauses, cells begin recycling damaged components, misfolded proteins, and inefficient structures. This cleanup is essential. Imagine trying to repair a building while debris is scattered everywhere. Cleanup must happen first. Autophagy provides that cleanup. And once cleanup begins, regeneration can follow. Stem cells respond to this environment by increasing readiness. They do not necessarily multiply explosively in one day, but they prime themselves. They become more responsive, more efficient, more capable of repairing tissue when nutrients return. This is a critical point. The goal is not to force stem cells. The goal is to remove what blocks them. At the same time, fat metabolism becomes more flexible. The body begins to switch between glucose and fat more efficiently. This is known as metabolic flexibility, and it is one of the strongest indicators of long-term metabolic health. People who struggle with stubborn fat often lack metabolic flexibility. Their bodies rely almost exclusively on glucose and resist accessing stored fat. This resistance is not a failure of willpower. It is a biological adaptation to constant feeding and constant insulin signaling. A single day of intentional metabolic rest can begin restoring flexibility. This is why many people report unexpected changes after just one day. Not dramatic weight loss, but reduced bloating, improved mental clarity, a lighter sensation in the abdomen. These are not placebo effects. They reflect reduced inflammation, improved fluid balance, and shifts in hormonal signaling. Another hormone begins to change during this window: growth hormone. Growth hormone plays a key role in tissue repair, fat metabolism, and muscle preservation. Its release increases during periods of fasting and low insulin. Growth hormone supports stem cell environments indirectly by promoting regeneration while protecting lean tissue. This is one reason fasting does not automatically lead to muscle loss when done correctly. The body adapts by preserving essential tissue while accessing stored energy. Cortisol, the stress hormone, also follows a predictable pattern. Chronic dieting often elevates cortisol. Chronic restriction signals danger. But a short, intentional pause does not necessarily trigger this response. When paired with adequate hydration, sleep, and mental calm, cortisol can remain balanced. This distinction matters. The body differentiates between controlled rest and chronic stress. One day, when approached with intention rather than fear, is interpreted as rest. This is why mindset matters. Not psychologically, but biologically. Stress perception alters hormonal output. Calm signals safety. This is also why hydration plays a critical role during this window. Water supports circulation, nutrient transport, and detoxification through natural pathways like the liver and kidneys. Proper hydration ensures that metabolic byproducts released during fat breakdown are efficiently processed. There is no need for extremes. No aggressive cleanses. No chemical detoxes. No deprivation mindset. Just clarity. This clarity allows the body to re-establish communication between systems that have been drowned out by constant input. Digestive signaling quiets. Immune signaling recalibrates. Hormonal rhythms regain coherence. And stem cells, always listening, respond accordingly. What is especially compelling is that these changes are measurable. Studies show improvements in insulin sensitivity, inflammatory markers, and metabolic flexibility after short fasting periods, even before weight changes occur. This tells us something important. Fat loss and regeneration are downstream effects. They are not the first step. They are the result of internal alignment. When the internal environment improves, external changes follow naturally. This is why forcing outcomes often fails. The body resists being controlled. But it responds beautifully when supported. Trying something for one day is not about testing discipline. It is about observing biology. It is about seeing how your body behaves when interference is removed. And for many people, this single day becomes a reference point. A reminder that their body is capable of regulation. A reminder that stubborn fat is responsive, not permanent. A reminder that regeneration is not lost. It is simply waiting. By the time the body has spent several hours in this state of metabolic calm, another layer of biology begins to reveal itself. This is the layer most people never hear about. Because it does not show up immediately on a scale. It does not announce itself with dramatic symptoms. But it quietly determines whether fat loss and regeneration are temporary or sustainable. This layer is cellular communication. Every cell in your body communicates constantly. Through hormones, through enzymes, through inflammatory molecules, through nutrient-sensing pathways. And when these signals are distorted, the body becomes confused. Confused biology does not heal efficiently. One of the most important signaling pathways affected during a one-day metabolic reset is the mTOR pathway. mTOR is a master regulator of growth and repair. When nutrients are abundant, especially sugar and protein, mTOR activity increases. This supports growth, but when mTOR remains constantly active, repair mechanisms are suppressed. It is like trying to renovate a building while construction crews are running non-stop. There is no pause to assess damage. No time to replace weak structures. Short periods of reduced nutrient intake gently lower mTOR activity. This does not weaken the body. It rebalances it. Lower mTOR activity allows autophagy to work more effectively. Damaged cellular components are identified and removed. Inefficient mitochondria, the energy factories of your cells, are recycled. Healthier mitochondria mean better fat burning. This connection is crucial. Fat loss is not just about calories. It is about mitochondrial efficiency. When mitochondria function well, fat is used cleanly for energy. When they are damaged or overloaded, fat accumulates even in the presence of activity. Stem cells are especially sensitive to mitochondrial health. Healthy mitochondria support stem cell differentiation and repair capacity. Poor mitochondrial function limits regeneration. So when a single day improves mitochondrial quality, even modestly, it sets off a cascade of benefits. At the same time, another important factor begins to change: insulin sensitivity at the cellular level. This is different from insulin levels in the blood. Insulin sensitivity refers to how well cells respond to insulin's signal. When sensitivity improves, less insulin is required to move glucose into cells. This reduces fat storage signals and lowers inflammatory stress. Visceral fat is particularly responsive to this shift. As insulin sensitivity improves, visceral fat tissue reduces its inflammatory output. This matters because visceral fat is not silent. It releases cytokines that influence the entire body. Lower visceral fat inflammation improves liver function. Improved liver function enhances fat metabolism. Enhanced fat metabolism supports cleaner energy production. Everything is connected. This is why addressing one pathway can influence many systems at once. Another often overlooked player in this process is the gut microbiome. The bacteria in your digestive tract respond rapidly to changes in eating patterns. Within hours, microbial populations begin to shift. During periods of rest, beneficial bacteria that support metabolic health gain a relative advantage. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids that reduce inflammation and improve insulin sensitivity. They also communicate with the immune system, influencing systemic inflammation. A calmer gut environment supports regeneration. Stem cells within the intestinal lining, some of the most active stem cells in the body, benefit directly from this shift. Improved gut integrity reduces inflammatory leakage into the bloodstream, further supporting systemic repair. This is why digestive calm often precedes metabolic calm. People often report less bloating, reduced discomfort, and improved mental clarity during these windows. These are not superficial experiences. They reflect real physiological changes. The brain also responds. Glucose stability improves neurotransmitter balance. Inflammation-related brain fog begins to lift. This creates a subtle but noticeable sense of focus. This mental clarity reinforces the perception of safety. And perception matters. The nervous system is deeply involved in metabolic regulation. When the brain perceives threat, it signals the body to conserve energy. When it perceives calm, it allows flexibility. One day of reduced metabolic noise can help recalibrate this loop. Another hormone influenced during this time is leptin, the hormone responsible for signaling fullness and energy sufficiency. Chronic overfeeding and chronic restriction both disrupt leptin signaling. When leptin resistance develops, the brain no longer accurately perceives energy status. This leads to persistent hunger and impaired fat regulation. Short periods of metabolic rest can help restore leptin sensitivity. This does not mean hunger disappears permanently, but it means signals become clearer. Clear signals support better decision-making without force. This is why many people notice that after a structured day, their appetite feels more controlled, not suppressed but regulated. Regulation is the goal. Not control. Not denial. Just accurate signaling. This accuracy benefits stem cells as well. Stem cells respond to hormonal harmony. When insulin, growth hormone, cortisol, and inflammatory signals are balanced, stem cells are more likely to engage in maintenance and repair rather than dormancy. It is important to emphasize something here. This process is not about extremes. Starvation does not enhance regeneration. Chronic stress does not burn fat efficiently. The body responds best to intermittent relief. This relief is enough to remind biological systems of their default state. Because the human body evolved with periods of abundance and periods of rest. Constant intake is a modern phenomenon. Biology has not adapted to it fully. Trying something for one day reintroduces a pattern the body recognizes. And recognition leads to cooperation. This is why the effects often feel surprisingly natural. No dramatic crashes. No overwhelming hunger. No sense of deprivation when done correctly. Instead, there is a quiet shift. A sense that the body is working with you rather than against you. And this is where the foundation for sustainable fat loss and regeneration is laid. Not in intensity. Not in force. But in alignment. At this point, something important becomes clear. The body does not resist change because it is weak. It resists change because it is protective. Every biological response we have discussed, fat storage, inflammation, stem cell dormancy, is rooted in survival. These systems evolved to keep you alive during uncertainty, not to optimize appearance or performance. When the body senses chaos, it chooses defense. When it senses safety, it allows renewal. This is the central idea behind trying something for one day. Not to chase a result. Not to force fat loss. Not to demand regeneration. But to create the conditions where these outcomes become possible. In modern life, the body is rarely given silence. Food arrives constantly. Stress signals remain elevated. Sleep cycles are disrupted. Inflammation becomes background noise. Over time, the body adapts by lowering expectations. Repair slows. Fat accumulates defensively. Stem cells retreat into conservation mode. This does not mean the system is broken. It means it is waiting. One intentional day is not a cure, but it is a message that says, you are safe to recalibrate. During this window, the body remembers how to switch modes. It remembers how to burn fat without panic. It remembers how to clean damaged cells without stress. It remembers how to support stem cell environments without forcing growth. This remembrance is subtle, but it matters. Because once the body experiences regulation again, it becomes easier to recognize it in the future. People often assume that health changes must be dramatic to be meaningful. But biology does not work that way. Biology responds to consistency of signals, not intensity of effort. A single day sends a clear signal. And sometimes, that signal is enough to restart a conversation between systems that have stopped listening to each other. This is why many people report something unexpected after trying this approach. Not just physical changes, but confidence. Confidence that their body can respond. Confidence that stubborn fat is not permanent. Confidence that regeneration is not lost. This confidence reduces stress. And reduced stress further supports metabolic health. It becomes a positive feedback loop. Another important realization often emerges here. Health is not about control. It is about cooperation. When you stop fighting your biology and start working with it, resistance fades. Fat loss becomes less emotional. Eating becomes more intuitive. Energy becomes more stable. Stem cells do not need to be stimulated aggressively. They need to be respected. They operate best in environments of balance. This is why extreme approaches often fail long-term. They ignore the body's need for safety. One day of intentional metabolic rest does the opposite. It communicates trust. And the body responds in kind. It is also worth remembering that regeneration is not always visible. You may not see immediate changes in the mirror. But beneath the surface, pathways are shifting. Inflammatory signals are quieter. Insulin sensitivity is improving. Cellular cleanup is underway. These are foundational changes. They create conditions where fat loss becomes easier and regeneration becomes more efficient over time. This is why sustainable change rarely begins with visible results. It begins with internal order. And internal order begins with simplicity. Not complexity. Not obsession. Just space. Space for the body to do what it already knows how to do. Trying something for one day is not about committing to a lifestyle forever. It is about listening. Listening to how your body responds when interference is removed. Listening to hunger cues when hormones are balanced. Listening to energy levels when inflammation subsides. This awareness is powerful. Because once you recognize how regulation feels, you can return to it. Again and again. Not through force, but through intention. The science is clear. The body is capable of regeneration. Stubborn fat is metabolically responsive. Stem cells are biologically active throughout life. What they require is the right environment. And sometimes, creating that environment begins with a single, deliberate pause. One day. Not as a challenge. Not as punishment. But as an invitation. An invitation for your biology to remember its design.